Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Podcast Pasta. That's a podcast that's like pasta, not the podcast that's about pasta. As always, I'm your host, Mike. And if you can tell from the episode title today, I kind of want to do more of a retrospective on the work of Joel Haver. Now, for some longtime listeners, you might be aware that I actually did cover Joel's work very briefly in the past. I actually did review one of his movies. I think it was like We Have to Leave Here Together or something like that. I can't remember the exact title. But admittedly, the quality of the audio in that episode wasn't that great because I just got my new mic and I forgot to adjust some settings in OBS. And I figured that, since Joel Haver has kind of progressed more in his career, I guess, as a filmmaker on YouTube, I figured now would be a more apt time to, kind of reevaluate my thoughts on his work as a whole. So I don't want to bury the lead too much. I actually do like a lot of Joel Haver's work. I actually do like him a lot as a director, but it kind of comes with an interesting caveat that I'll kind of get into a bit later in this episode. But just in case you don't know, Joel Haver, he is a YouTube filmmaker. For a while, he was kind of known for doing like these weekly sketches with his friend. Sometimes they were like rotoscope animated, sometimes it was like live action. But recently, he's kind of pivoted away from that in favor of doing like actual like full length like feature YouTube films, basically. And more importantly, as of I think last year, he took on a project to basically release 12 movies within the course of like 2024, which, if you know anything about like filmmaking, that is like quite an endeavor to do like 12, right? And I think at the time of this recording, he I think has pretty much released every film from that. I know there was kind of like some weird things with the release schedule. Like at first it was like pretty regularly, and then he had to kind of take like a break, and then he released a lot in December. So I finally caught up to all those films, and you kind of see a lot with Joel Haver's work, especially like I think post his 2024 like 12 film project. But I think in general, what I guess I'll start with the positives. What I do like about Joe Haver's work is that he's very, I like to describe him as a very like human director. I think what I see in a lot of his work is that he puts a lot of himself in it, which is what I really appreciate. That even though he might stumble with some things here and there, which I'll get to a bit later, you get a sense that these films are very much a product of like his own passion, of his own ideas, and it's resulted in some very beautiful stories that I think are just simply amazing. The fact that I think he has himself kind of even pushed like what you can do in terms of YouTube as a distribution. I don't know how I don't want to say like model, but like as a source of distribution for like these type of movies. I think he has done a lot in that regard. And especially, I guess one thing that has kind of changed when I did my review way back when was that I think with him finishing these 12 movies for 2024, you see kind of he's developed, I think, kind of more confidence in his own filmmaking. The example I would give is one critique that I had before with Joel Haver's films is that he kind of does like this. He kind of did this thing that like a lot of amateur filmmakers I think do sometimes, is where they feel like, oh, I'm making a movie, I want it to be treated seriously as a movie, and as a part of that, they have to like push the runtime of their film. So like the film I talked about earlier, We Have to Leave Here Together, I think was like 2 hours or so. I can't remember like the exact runtime, but it was like a longer film. And part of my criticism was that you could have like I think edited it you could have done more. You could have edited for like a better pacing to be like, an hour 30, I think would have been fine for that type of film, right? But fast forward to this 12 film project they committed, and you could see him now kind of being like, okay, I can now do just an hour and a half movie, and that's like completely fine. And I think it has helped the pacing of his film, I think, a lot better. I think he's also confident in the sense that he's not afraid to like experiment with new styles, because from the onset of 2024 when he announced it, um, I got the sense that, it was going to be all kind of in a similar style, like something that is very, approachable for like, like basically like what a YouTuber can make as a movie. But like, no, he's done like different genres. Like he did comedy, he did like romance dramas, kind of like, I think even one had like some suspense elements in it. Different like mediums. He did like stop motion with like these dolls or what have you. Different like filming perspectives. Like he did a whole film, like I think shot through like I don't know what you call it, like a portrait style, like through a phone, basically. Um, and I think a lot of that, a lot of your enjoyment of that, it kind of depends on what you look for in filmmakers. Because I know there's a lot of like filmmakers that they kind of thrive in like telling one type of story in a particular way, but telling it really well. The examples I would give are like James Gunn. He has like the what I would call the Guardians of the Galaxy formula, where a group of rough tag like miscreants basically have to join up together to save the world. And you see then Guardians of the Galaxy, Suicide Squad, even like Creature Commandos, and like Peacemaker even had that to like some degree. Or Guillermo del Toro, there's that video essay from I think Innuendo Studios where he talked about like how he kind of has a bit of a formula to like his films, but like but he's really good at that particular type of formula where the monster isn't always like the monster, right? So you have like filmmakers like that, but conversely, you have someone like, let's say, Ridley Scott that do experiment with their own styles, but they don't want like to tell the same story over and over again. I think Joel Haver kind of more embodies that with his work, at least for now. I don't know if he'll like shift directions like that. He's obviously, I think, pretty young. I think still very much experimenting with like his expression and the type of the story, the style that he wants to convey through his filmmaking. And I'm all here for the ride, but coming back to kind of that caveat I was talking about earlier is that so a big part of Joel Haver's image as like a YouTuber, as a filmmaker, is that he's very much presents himself as like an amateur filmmaker, right? Like, and I'm not talking about like indie filmmaker, no, very much like an amateur kind of backyard filmmaker, making films outside of the bureaucracy of like the modern like filmmaking industry. And yeah, I mean, you do see that in his films, right? I think like an interesting part of his process that he talked about, for example, was that how he frames a shot is he basically describes it as just like whatever looks good to me. Sorry. Like, yeah, whatever looks good to me, which is, I mean, that's kind of like a very, I don't know how to describe it, like a bullheaded way of approaching like cinematography or whatever. Um, so yeah, he presents himself, and I think part of his appeal is that he's like this amateur like filmmaker, right? And while on one hand you do see that in his filmmaking, the problem that I have is that it's difficult to, especially now, to say that Joel Haver is like quote unquote an amateur filmmaker, at least in some regards, right? Because like Joel Haver, I think he has like 2 million subscribers as of this recording. he has like more resources than like he has like more resources. He has like the resources that like most amateur filmmakers would like kill for, right? He has like obviously he has like the equipment to like film and make these movies. He has like the time, right? He has like his dedicated, staff, like staff and cast that, help him in terms of, like bringing these films to life, and in terms of, I think, I don't know, possibly like helping him with editing and certain things like that. But most importantly, like the most valuable resource he arguably has is like an actual audience to watch his work, right? So while on one hand, and this is where I kind of get into the difficulty of how the difficulty that I have in evaluating his work is that, on one hand, he is kind of an amateur filmmaker, so obviously there are like mistakes that are naturally going to arise with someone, especially someone like Joel Haver, who's still trying to experiment with his own style. But on the same token, like he does, have like these. I guess what I'm trying to say is like I don't know how forgiving I should be of Joel Haver's mistakes, considering like the resources that he has as a filmmaker, right? Like how forgiving would you be of like Scorsese for any of his mistakes, for example? Right. Like at what point, at like what size do you get like big enough to where you should be expecting like more from a filmmaker? And honestly, there's no like clear lines to that. It just, like I said, it makes it very difficult to assess like, oh, was this mistake that he made in this movie because of like, was it because of like just the amateur, like because he has like a limited budget or anything, or is it just something due to like incompetence, right? Like he just doesn't know how to do that, and I don't really know. An example I would give is like earlier a while back I was talking, like he did a stop motion movie, and well, for the most part I did enjoy it. One kind of weird thing about it was that, and I don't know if, because mind you, I don't have like a background in like stop motion animation or like anything like that, but like each shot was kind of it seemed like, I don't know if it was like the camera was being moved with each shot, or like because they were working maybe with like natural lighting, but it's like the frame was moving, like the actual frame itself was moving with each shot, and it was initially kind of jarring to look at. After a while you kind of get used to the effect of it, but like for something like that, how hard would I go on Joel Haver? Like, do I give him credit for just even attempting stop motion, right? Or was it something like too ambitious, and like I should, and it would be more along the lines of he shouldn't have tried at all? And I don't really know, right? But I guess to be kind of fair and to be self-reflective, I think a bit here, uh, when kind of thinking about like that, like how big is like too big for like certain mistakes to be made in like one's content or in like one's filmmaking. I kind of think about like myself, right? Because admittedly, I make a lot of mistakes with like my own work that I do, here on like podcast pasta. You see right there, for example. Um, and I try and do my best, but like things are gonna happen. I'm like a one man operation, and admittedly, I have a lot less resources than Joel Haver. I think like I have like 46 subscribers. By the way, if you've listened this far, like and subscribe. But anyways, no, but I still do make mistakes, like sometimes with my sound, or sometimes something goes wrong with like the video footage I'm using or whatever, and I have to kind of like adapt and kind of like do it on my own. But like at what point do like my mistakes become unacceptable, right? And because everyone's like their own harsh critic, but I try not to be too hard on myself. But you can't help it sometimes, because it's like your work, it's like you putting yourself out there, and you obsess about the mistakes more than like the successes of things. Um, so yeah, I guess that's kind of where I am with Joel Haver's work. I am very much still looking forward to seeing like what he does in the future. I think like from what I can gauge, he very much still enjoys doing like these types of like smaller films for YouTube. Like it, at the very least, it doesn't seem like he wants to do something larger, like maybe like an independent movie or anything like that. I think right now he's probably just taking a break at the very least because again, it is a very exhausting endeavor. And again, I don't want this to seem like I'm disparaging Joel Haver. I appreciate his ambition as a filmmaker, and especially given like what he's tried to do, given like his limited resources and the nature of YouTube as a platform, especially like now and potentially in the future. Um, and so I don't know. I don't know. I am very curious about all that. But I think that is pretty much all I have to say on the topic here. Thank you so much for joining me. Um, and I could really go for buying some diarrhea. What can I say? Later.